We'll get started. As per last year, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping procedure notes for the AGM today, just to refresh everybody on some of the points of Robert Rules, and just to help ensure everyone's got a refresher on the process of the meeting, so that we can so that it helps to ensure we have a productive meeting. First point is motions. So the purpose of making a motion is that the mover is asking all of the voting members, so the assembly, to take action on something. So nothing would go to discussion without a motion being on the floor. And as a reminder, the person making or seconding a motion is not asking the voting members to approve the motion. They're just asking the voting members to consider, discuss, and then I'll call a vote on the motion. Once a motion is made, it will need a seconder, and I will be asking for these points. And then after that, after we have a mover and a seconder, I'll ask the assembly for any discussion. So please, when you make a motion or second it, remember to announce yourself by name. With respect to speaking, after a motion is made and seconded and we move on to discuss, I'll ask that each member speaks only once until all of the members have had a chance to speak. If you would like to speak, please state your name and ask for the floor. And if by chance, because there are many people on this call, it's a little challenging to manage that on the telephone, if more than one person on the floor would like to speak at the same time, please just pause and let me announce the order of speakers, just so we can keep everything moving smoothly. The next point is voting. So once we make motions and they're seconded and discussion has concluded, I'll call the matter to a vote. I will first ask, we're going to do it a little bit differently this year. So first I will ask for those who vote yes, please say aye. And I would just ask that everyone voting yes says aye. And then at that time I'll say those who vote no say nay. And so then anyone who does not wish to support the motion would say nay out loud. If there are multiple nays, I'll call a roll call vote. And we'll go again just like we just did through the names, through category A, then B, then C, and we'll record the names. Following that, we'll take a brief pause and I'll announce the results. And then last piece is technology. In the last AGM and a little bit the year before, we had a little bit of interference with background noise. I must say, so far it sounds great. If you are calling in on a cell phone, you might have any background dogs, people, horns, etc. So please do us a favor and keep your phone on mute. It also would be a good idea if you were not on speakerphone for anybody that's on speakerphone. And also just keep in mind, if we were mentioning earlier on, if you are watching on Facebook Live and you have the sound playing from your computer and are also on a cell phone, it might create some background noise. So just please keep one item making sound and mute everything else. We do have the ability, if there's a lot of distracting background noise, to mute the line. So far, I'm not going to do that, but if there becomes any interference noise that's distracting for everybody, I will just mute the line and then reopen it when it's time to speak again. The last point to make, this call, the meeting is also being recorded, and it is also being streamed on Facebook Live. Are there any questions about this process before we continue? Okay. I will finish my president's update after we do the first two housekeeping items, which is the approval of agenda and approval of last year's minutes. So let's get started. First item, approval of the agenda. You've all received the draft agenda on August 31st, so I would like to ask if there is somebody who would move to adopt the agenda.
Peter Chitty, I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And seconded?
Liz.
Thanks.
Father.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Liz. We did not receive any edits to the agenda, and oh, sorry, this is my note for the next. So are there any questions about the agenda? Okay, hearing none, I will call for a vote. So all who vote yes to support the adoption of the agenda, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Perfect. And all who vote no, please say nay. Excellent. Okay, the agenda has been adopted. Second order of business is the approval of the minutes from the 2018 annual general meeting. These were also circulated on August 31st. We had not received any requests for corrections. However, we did have one administrative corrections to make on page 11 to remove the bolded reference which said, Meg, do you want to include these Q&As that were not sent prior to the meeting? So instead, we would request to insert a heading, other questions, and the remainder of the questions would still be noted. So with those changes, I would like to ask if there is someone who would make a motion to adopt the minutes, to approve the minutes from the 2018 AGM as corrected.
Liz Saunders, so moved.
Thank you, Liz. And a seconder?
Dan Gall, second.
Thank you, Dan. So for the motion on the table to approve the 2018 AGM minutes as corrected, those who vote yes, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
And those who vote no, please say nay. Okay, thank you. The minutes are approved as corrected. Moving on to item D. Sorry, before we get to item D, I'm completing my president's report that I began in my opening remarks. So would like to just give you a briefing over the activities of the past board year. It was a year that I would summarize as having centered on planning and preparing for change. In addition to many projects that were started and completed by the organization and board, which I will also summarize momentarily, as you know, the board commenced an organizational review to assess our goals and project commitments and how our operational structures would have to adjust in order to achieve those goals over the coming years. So just to step back for a brief moment and give you a little further perspective as to why we were planning and preparing for this change, I'll just share the following kind of 4 points from the year prior.
Has left the conference.
In the board's prior year, in 2017-2018, a core focus of that year was the board's commitment to EC's future and the development of a 5-year growth plan. And as you all know, that plan is called the Strategic Initiatives Plan. It was created based on the assessment of previous strat plans, plus analyzing and incorporating new priority projects and the present state and needs of our industry and sport. So the purpose of that strat plan and of creating a master plan in general was to identify the direction we saw the organization taking in the next 5 years so that operational plans could be developed and aligned with that larger vision and ensure we're all moving in the same direction. So that strat plan is a fundamental driver, and it's a guide for all of the conversations and decisions the board undertakes. So it really truly is our roadmap. So as a final reminder that, as we discussed last year, as we assess that strat plan, some of the questions we asked ourselves were, where are we going to be organization and the equestrian landscape in Canada look like by that time, and what will we have achieved? So now to jump forward, to get back to that 2018-2019 board year that's just wrapping up right now, I'd like to highlight this past year in 2 parts. The first part is to discuss the organizational review itself, and the second part is to highlight the projects that we've outlined in the board's annual activity report. So on the organizational review, after having completed our own internal organizational assessment during that May to September 2018 timeframe, and then releasing the strat plan in September 2018, the AGM last year, the incoming board and senior leadership spent the first 5 months of this past board year in consultations with all of the operational and discipline committees and our stakeholders and community with respect to their questions and recommendations that they would provide so that we could fine-tune and adjust the strat plan. By January 2019, an external organizational review began. So this external review was conducted by third party, DSC Consulting, and our January press release that announced the review truly stated our intentions. And those were to dig into the heart of the organization in order to produce the changes that will not only set ourselves up for success, but that will produce the results we need, as outlined in that strat plan, to revitalize participation, build a strong pathway, and ensure operational efficiency and revenue diversification. So that release stated, "We will leave no stone unturned in this assessment." DSC Consulting led a 6-month analysis, gathering feedback from stakeholders, sport partners, team members, and volunteers, with that project completing in June and the final report presented to the board on July 8th. By spring 2019, a public survey on our community's perceived progress of the strat plan took place and received over 8,000 cells of data and feedback on the initiatives. The strat plan task force, which is chaired by Carla Robin, has been actively reading and interpreting every single response, and the final 360-degree review, or our report card, will be presented at convention during the welcome reception and then communicated publicly thereafter. The board's HR committee was charged with interpreting the DSC report, comparing that external report to the board's own internal assessments that had taken place the year prior, and then advising the board on next step recommendations. The HRC was populated with directors that had legal expertise, our strategic plan task force chair, industry, PTSO, and sport representation. In July and August 2019, the board received and assessed the recommendations of the HR committee. Following analysis, we approved ECE's new organizational structure and timeframe for implementation, which I will also discuss a little bit more as the meeting continues. Our team assessment was thorough and difficult. We made the decision to go in a very specific direction in the pursuit of the goals outlined in our strat plan, and that direction requires specific skill sets in our team. In September 2019, the final component of this process began, the implementation phase of the organizational restructuring. This process, under the leadership of our interim CEO, Eve Hamlin, will take us through to December 2019. So just a few side comments or special comments here. I know that many voting members have expressed questions about recent team departures, and I can assure you that we have greatly appreciated the work, dedication, and commitment to EC that Richard Mongeau and John Garner have demonstrated throughout their employment. We have enjoyed working with them and wish them continued success. I also know that several voting members have expressed concern over the perceived conflict of interest of employing Eve Hamlin as interim CEO of ECE. I know some of the questions that were brought forward from the voting members address this, and I will answer it in detail when we get to the Q&A session. But I felt it was an important element to address the concern right now and just make a few brief points. Eve was a consultant with DSC Communications team who conducted the external organizational review. The board was very aware that there could be a perceived conflict of interest in asking Eve whether he would accept the role to be our interim CEO during the implementation phase of the organizational restructuring over the next year. Through this process, I must express that we assessed a list of candidates, both internal and external to the organization. And based on this thorough analysis, comparing the external review to our own internal review, the responsibility that we had to put a temporary leader in place who could ensure as seamless a transition as possible and ensure ongoing projects continued without significant delay. Based on all of these facts, we made our decision to move forward. And as I mentioned, I will elaborate on this further when we get to the Q&A session. So to connect back to that second update from last year, which is the board activity report. And this I know was circulated to you as well with the AGM documents on August 31st. It's extensive. Every committee submits their report and describes the activities and actions and progresses that they've achieved in the past year. So I'll just highlight a few of those in bullet point. Number one, of course, as we just discussed, the organizational review planning was completed, including approval of the new organizational structure, and the board has now progressed into the implementation phase. In the past year, we've also completed our Competition Structural Alignment Committee, so we call that CSAC, phase 1, and that is comprised of an extensive data collection with years of data entered from NSO, PTSO, USCF, FEI, and other show facility sources. The historical data that we collected, as well as the learnings and the visualization tool that was developed, will have long-term benefits to the organization. The CSAC Phase 1 committee from all discipline groups brought Phase 1 conclusion and Phase 2 recommendations to the board this summer, receiving unanimous support. Phase 1 committee was then dissolved. Next point of our accomplishments are what we achieved last year. We engaged a provider called Momentum IT, And this provider will be providing e-learning services for our sport license holders and learning content designed in partnership with our PT. Several weeks ahead that left for us to align that new complaints process with a rulebook review, which has now also begun. So just to wrap up in closing remarks on that last year's summary and what comes next. So where in 2018, the message I was presenting to you was that year had centered on the creation of our 5-year strategic plan. The message today is that our 2019 annual summary message centers on our planning and preparing for change to align with that plan. So what comes next? Some of the priorities that the current board will be handing to the new board in the new board year that will begin when this meeting ends are as follows. To implement our new organizational internal restructure by the end of this calendar year. We'll again go over that timeline during the Q&A. Engage with operational and discipline committees on financial policy development for the reserve funds that have been raised in prior years and dedicated to specific disciplines or activities. Prepare for a public recruitment for our full-time CEO in 2020. Prioritize business development in our commitment to diversify and increase revenue. Roll out our coach licensing and respect in sport initiatives by spring of 2020 in partnership with our PTSOs. And I'll also talk more about this in the Q&A session. Commence our CSAC, that's that Competition Structural Alignment Committee, Phase 2, starting with the Phase 1 recommendations that include next step activities or actions for each discipline in their own competition review, plus an overall competition sanctioning and fee review. Work with the National Rules Committee to review and update the rulebook, which has not had a top to bottom review for many years. Complete the new registration portal for its official launch to simplify the license and membership registration process. Begin a dialogue with our industry partners as to how EC can best represent the needs of industry in Canada. And finally, continue to meet milestone dates with our PTSOs in the Canadian Equestrian Development Plan, which we call the CED, which was created in partnership with EC and the PTSOs and at the moment centers on coaching and athlete development initiatives. So in closing, the board and EC are working very hard to push the needle forward in making the Canadian equestrian industry and sport healthier and more prosperous. And we're not doing it alone. There are hundreds of people involved in this process through our own structures and committees and through our partnerships and strategic alliances. Our mission is that EC operates with collaboration, transparency, accountability, and innovation, and is structured to successfully achieve what we have outlined in the Strategic Initiatives Plan. So as always, I continuously encourage involvement of new people, youth, those who are experts in their field, and those who want to be part of making this organization better to join us, get involved, join committees and boards. We welcome you. So on that note, I would like to invite our new interim CEO, Eve Hamlin, to say a few brief words to the Assembly. And I'll just do a very brief little introduction to Eve before he does that. Eve Hamlin has participated in 5 Olympic Games as team leader, high performance director, Olympic game preparation. He contributed to 8 Olympic podiums and over 200 World Cup and World Championship podiums in 2 Olympic cycles. That would be Vancouver 2010 and Sochi 2014. Nationally, Eve has led and redesigned the national racing circuit, as well integrating alignment with international performance requirements. In 2014, Eve joined the University of Calgary as the lead of the Olympic venue to ensure optimal sport development and performance. He partnered with IOC and Olympic OC to prepare their plan. He led his staff towards strategic plan and sport business achievements. And he led the quadrennial strategic plan as well as yearly debrief and yearly objectives. Finally, he was the co-lead of the University of Calgary 2026 Olympic game day preparation. In his former past, he also worked in the aeronautics field, so that was with Pratt & Whitney Canada and Bombardier, for 17 years as a director and lead of major reorganizations, and was trained as a Kaizen facilitator to integrate continuous improvement programs in business units via his leadership. So Yves, I'll just pass that over to you to say a few brief words, and then we will continue to the next agenda item.
Thank you very much, Meg. So first, I'm glad to get the opportunity to participate with this year's AGM in as early in my assignment, so that's going to help me bring me up to speed. So through the review, so I had the chance to assess the organization opportunities moving forward. So this is going to definitely be an asset on my side at this point. And so for the coming months, my focus will be getting into all sides of equestrian industry and sport in order to identify, grow, develop partnerships and to support EC future success. So despite my natural focus on sport development, high performance, and business development, the integration of industry perspective will always need to be always behind strategies moving forward. So this will be a daily focus from now on to ensure that this is taken into consideration in the step moving forward. So and lastly, in the updated structure, Meg, you were talking about a lot about the strategic initiatives. So these strategic plan will be integrated to make continuous improvement in each area, and this will be a daily focus for the team. So actually, it's been outlined into it's been outlined into KPIs, and this will be become the platform for the staff, for the team to support the whole the various needs in the organization and the expected program. So thank you again for welcoming me in the team, and I hope we're going to have a chance to meet soon.
Perfect. Thank you, Yves. Okay, we're going to move forward into point E, which is the report of the Audit Committee. So I'd like to introduce Rob Mitchell, the Chair of the Board's Finance Committee, to take us through the report.
Okay, thanks very much, Meg, and good evening to everybody. I first of all like to thank the members of the Finance and Audit Committee for their time and their expertise throughout the past year. EC financially is a complex organization, and I appreciate everyone's efforts as we learned and tried to improve our financial reporting. I'd especially like to recognize the contribution of John Whiteman, our Director of Finance and Admin. John's been with us less than a year, but I think he's probably put in a year and a half worth of hours as he works to understand, improve, and guide the financial operations of EC. I can see that we've definitely benefited from John's years of experience in both the private sector and nonprofits, including experience with other national sports organizations. In the material that was distributed, everybody has a copy of the financial statements and the report of the Finance and Audit Committee. And I would just like to highlight some of the important information that's contained in there. First of all, a major difference this year compared to previous years is the actual presentation of the financial information. Previously, in years before this, we had recorded revenue and expenses in the statement of operations by department. And for me, and I think other users of the financial statements, The results were quite opaque, and it was very difficult to understand changes year to year. And I frankly couldn't tell where the revenue was coming from, or indeed where the money was being spent. So we have adopted a new set of standards for financial statement presentation, and Kirsten Giles from KPMG, who's been instrumental in this, will speak after me and go into more detail about it. I think the major benefit of the change is transparency. We can see much more easily the source of our revenues, where we're spending the money, and compare that this year versus last year and previous years. And we are also much more comparable. Our financial statements will be much more comparable to other similar organizations. So I think it's a very big plus for us. Users of financial statements should find it much easier to understand the statements. So just turning to our operating results for the year ended March 31st. This is page 2 of the operating statements. It comes immediately after the auditor's report. I can report that our revenue, this is for the year ended March 31st, 2019, our revenue was $6.6 million compared to $6 million the previous year. So there was a 10% increase in total revenue. Our biggest source of revenue, of course, is sports license fees. It was unchanged compared to the previous year, very slight increase, $2.3 million in sport license fee revenue. Government funding is the next biggest source, $1.4 million. Again, that was unchanged. Competition revenue increased by $50,000 to $914,000. And what we call membership revenue saw the biggest increase as membership revenue went from $420,000 in 2018 to $853,000 to the year ended March 2019. There are two components of membership revenue. It comprises revenue from PTSOs and revenue from affiliation fees, and both of those increased significantly over the year, from one year to the next. And the affiliation fee was part of the restructure of fees that was done a little over a year ago. On the expense side, again, you can see the benefit of more transparency, as we're now showing expenses by major expense category rather than by department. So you can see that our biggest expense is salaries and benefits. This year it was $2.4 million. It is up about $300,000 over the previous year. Now this line item includes salaries and expenses of the permanent staff, as well as consultants and other advisors. So it includes the costs of some board initiatives, including the organizational review. And that would be the main reason why it was higher this year versus the previous years. Discipline expense is the other item that's significantly different. It's up almost $600,000 from the previous year, and the principal reason for that is this was a wave year, World Equestrian Games. So the costs associated with that have impacted discipline expense as well as meeting and travel expense. The previous year, there was no significant international competitions, So that's why the increase. The other items are not much changed. So on an operating basis, we had a small surplus last year, a small surplus of about $70,000. We then wrote off some obsolete inventory, and so net of that write-off, we ended up with a slight deficit of $50,000. In the previous year, our expenses before any, our net result before any write-offs was $171,000. We had a write-off of $150,000. People remember that was the previous accounting system, and we had a small surplus. So we've gone from a small surplus to a small deficit over the 2 years, as a result of that, our cash position and our reserves are little changed 1 year to the next. And then I just want to address the audit. Again, our audit was done by KPMG, and the lead being Kirsten Giles. It was a clean audit. There were no issues raised about our reporting, and no issues in regard to our internal controls. Kirsten has told me that she had the full cooperation of assistance of our finance staff, and they were cooperative throughout. I believe Kirsten has added a lot of value on behalf of KPMG to our operations this year. We've certainly benefited from her advice and her experience with similar organizations. So with that, I'd just like to turn it over to Kirsten to talk a little bit about the audit.
That's great. Thanks so much, Bob. So essentially, as Rob has said, we are providing a clean audit opinion for the organization, which is essentially what we want to see based on exactly what you said. We received full cooperation from management. We were able to complete all our audit procedures as designed, and we did not identify any significant deficiencies in internal control. So our recommendation as your auditor was to basically consider the chosen accounting policy of the accounting for contributions under the restricted fund method, or to perhaps consider adopting the deferral method. So if I could give you the Coles Notes version of that, what that essentially means is under the restricted fund method that the organization was or had chosen or had adopted, it means that no restricted revenue can be deferred. So that would mean regardless of the financial period that it might belong in or that it is intended for, it would be recognized as revenue when received or almost on a cash basis. So essentially under the deferral method, that would mean that any restricted revenue could be deferred for the period it actually would belong in, potentially. So this would mean sport license fees that are restricted for a future year, or actually would be earned in a future year, or it could be a contribution that was received either from the Government of Canada or another source that might be intended for a year like 2022. So really what that would mean is you can more accurately match your revenues with expenses in the year they occur. Whereas under the restricted fund method, it's not really the case. You could see large businesses in any year given contributions received, and then maybe not having the matching of expenses, which is typically what organizations do. So normally a restricted fund method of accounting for contributions is usually chosen by charities that actually have different fundraising arms. So maybe for hunger relief in certain countries, or for another purpose. So we track all the donations we receive, recognize this revenue immediately, and then we'll disperse out in future periods. Whereas the organization, would benefit more from the deferral method, given that you can more closely match your revenues with expenses. So that was our recommendation, and we understand, of course, given that change in accounting policy, that the statements do look considerably different. So Rob has gone through those major changes. The one piece that we haven't quite finalized would be basically the presentation of the restricted funds or reserves that have been built up over the years by discipline. So I understand that that work will be conducted starting in the fall. I did want to point out at least that nothing has happened to those reserves as an adoption of this accounting policy change. They are still present in the organization. If we look at the statement of changes in their assets, which would be page 3 of the paper copy or page 7 of the PDF, you'll see there we still have $2.1 million in the total net assets. And from back to the statement of financial position, most of that money is invested in GIC, so fairly stable and non-income producing assets, if you will. There's also a healthy cash balance, so that money is still definitely there. It's just how it's going to be chosen to shift in the future. So I will pause there just to see if there are any questions on this change in accounting policy or anything else to do with the audit.
Do any of the voting members have questions they would like to ask?
Yeah, it's Ms. Saunders. Just wondering, have you already changed over, or did you do it with the new financial year?
The adoption of the accounting policy did take place for the 2019 year.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It's Mike. Yeah, it's Mike Lawrence. Just so confirming, there's been absolutely no change with the restricted funds, and they're still going to be used in the manner they were intended. So, if we're jumping, for example, in other disciplines, there will be no change going forward.
Right, I think it will just be a matter of how it's shown on the statement. So currently there, we had to remove that reflection given the change from restricted fund methods to the deferral method, but I do understand there's work to be done in that area, so to make it a bit more clear.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mike, Eve will be meeting with discipline and operating committees starting in the fall with our team, the EC team, to work on defining that financial policy and budgets and so forth. So that will, as Kirsten had said, those conversations will also continue in the fall, and everyone will be involved in that.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you.
It's Sue Carroll. Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Sue.
In the write-up, it said that there will be a review, or I think that's what it said, and that some of the restricted funds may have been overstated, or at least they're not completely accurate from the last few years. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's what's in the report, and this will be part of the discussion that Eve has with each of the committees. My understanding is that in years gone by, there was an allocation of some of the what I'll call overhead expenses to those funds, but for the last several years, there has been no allocation.
And will you be able to look back and see what that is, or I guess that's to be determined?
Yeah, I think that will be part of the discussions that Eve has with each of the committees.
Thank you.
Are there any other financial questions from the voting members?
Yeah, it's Liz again, if nobody else has one. I'm just wondering why there is such a huge, like, 50% increase in the membership revenue.
As I said, there are two components to that. There's the PTSO revenue and the affiliation fees. The PTSO revenue, 1 year to the next, is significantly higher. And to be honest, I don't have an explanation. Whether it's a timing issue or not, I don't know. And the affiliation fee revenue is just part of the way that the restructuring of the sports license fees went. So it's a new category for most disciplines, new revenue.
Okay. I have a hard time understanding how by amalgamating the disciplines into, one fee, increase it by that much, but that's okay. It's not rocket
It's a mix of both of those things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we continue? Okay, so we're going to move to,
Peter Chitty, sorry.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
It's Peter Chitty. I just wanted to go back to this membership thing. If it is a timing difference, which I rather suspect it is, the only concern with that is that the 800 may be overstated for the year, and so in looking forward and planning, one should probably not plan on 800 if it's a timing problem, which as I say, I'm pretty sure it is.
Thanks, Peter. Obviously, that is something that from an operational perspective, Eve and John will ensure from a budgeting perspective that they assess that and that that's properly reflected in the budgets for the next year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna move along then to number F, which is acceptance of the financial statements. So I'll state that the voting members have received the 2018-19 approved audited financial statements that, again, they were circulated in your package on August 31st. And as of today, have received the auditor's report and the report from the chair of the Audit and Finance Committee. So the approval of the audited, or the acceptance of the audited financial statements, this is a 5-part process that we go through. Step 1, staff complete the annual financials that year-end ending March 31, 2019, so that was completed. The financials are then audited by the third-party auditor, KPMG, of course that's completed. The audited financials are reviewed and approved by the board's finance committee, that's completed. And then the audited financials are approved by the board of directors, which is completed. So the last step is that the approved audited financials are presented to the voting members at the AGM. So it's required by our bylaws that the approved audited financials be accepted by the voting members, and that acceptance is receipt of the financials 21 days prior to the AGM in order for them to be deemed accepted. So I would like to ask if there's a motion to confirm that the 2018-19 audited financial statements have been accepted by the voting members.
Peter Chitty, I'll move.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, thank you. Is there someone who will?
Sue Alderden, I'll second that.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, any further discussion or question on that item before I call that to vote? Okay, so on the motion on the table, those that vote yes, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and those who vote no, please say nay. Okay, thank you. So that is passed. Thank you very much. The item number G, or item G, is the appointment of the auditors. So I would like to ask Rob Mitchell, does the Finance Committee have any recommendations?
Yes, our strong recommendation is to reappoint KPMG as our auditors.
Okay, thank you. So then I'll ask, is there a voting member who would make a motion to appoint KPMG as Equestrian Canada's auditor for the 2019-2020 year? I need a mover and a seconder.
Victoria Carroll. Motion.
Okay, I heard Sue Carroll and Victoria Kendall. So Sue moved, Victoria seconded.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments about the motion on the table? Okay, so we'll do this one more time. For the motion to approve and appoint KPMG as Equestrian Canada's 2019-2020 auditor, those who vote yes, please say aye.
Aye.
And those who vote no, please say nay. Okay, thank you. We are completed in that section. So thank you to Kirsten and Rob very much for your presentations today. The next item that we're going to move to is number H, which is the question period. So this session, or this portion of the agenda, is there to discuss governance-related questions from each category of voting member. In order to address the questions that are being presented today, I'll just start by summarizing that we received 5 questions from category A, 5 from category B, and 2 from category C. So though we typically only receive 2 per category, I'm going to answer all of the questions. It'll take a little bit of time, but we'll get through every one. As a note, the board did receive additional questions from category A previously. I won't be able to answer all of them, just with respect to the time. However, please be assured I'll respond to every question. Any question that doesn't get covered, it will be responded to. And in addition, if any questions arise today that out of the responses, they can also be emailed directly to me. I always am welcoming emails at president@equestrian.ca, and again, I'll respond to every question that's received. So we're gonna go in. What's that? I'm sorry? Oh, okay, I guess that wasn't intended. Okay, we're gonna go into the questions and how we did it, because they're, just so that I don't dominate all this speaking, Marilyn is going to be helping us by reading the questions as we go through them. So just to start off, there was one question that was supported, or that themed question, by all 3 categories. So just in the effort of time and not repeating the exact same question 3 times, I'm going to address that one first. And then when that one's done, we'll go through the specific questions, or the unique questions to each category. And as well as that, I'm going to answer 2 questions from each category. So I'll do 2 from A, 2 from B, 2 from C, and then I'll return back and get the remainder of the questions. So Marilyn, would you help read the first one?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. The questions relate to the fact that category constituents may likely see a perceived conflict of interest that Mr. Hamelin was appointed as interim CEO while having led consulting role in the organizational review. In addition, the voting members questioned whether the board is concerned about high staff turnover at the leadership level.
Okay, so the answer to that. So number 1, with respect to staff turnover, it is one of the board's key priorities to ensure the longevity and stability of the entire ECE team, not only leadership. Our organizational review has been designed to organize the team and departments within EC's office to produce a positive working environment and culture, and also achieve the goals, as I mentioned earlier, that we set out for ourselves in the strategic plan. We do not want to see high turnover in the future, and we have prioritized that through both the strat plan and the changes we're undertaking to ensure staff turnover across the organization is as low as possible. To answer the question with respect to the expressed concern of perceived conflict of interest of Eve Hamelin, I know I mentioned it briefly earlier, but I'll go into a little more detail. Following the completion of DSC Consulting's organizational review on June 30th, 2019, the board met in camera on several occasions to evaluate the report in relation to our own internal organizational assessments and the feedback that we collected throughout this process. In our discussion relating to finding an individual to fill the interim CEO role, we thoroughly assessed a list of potential candidates for that role. We were very much aware and sensitive to the fact that a perceived conflict of interest could be felt by our voting members and members of the community by offering this interim position to Eve. And this was a very important part of our discussion. We want to make it clear that the board has satisfied itself that there are no legal or actual conflicts of interest here, but we absolutely understand why the issue might arise. Given our extensive assessment and in light of all of the points that we'd analyzed, we made the decision to offer Eve the interim CEO role. This role is valid for 14 months. I'm sorry, could someone please mute the phone? That has some background noise. This role is valid for 14 months while he completes the implementation of our organizational restructuring and while the board begins their public recruitment process for a full-time CEO in 2020. So my last point is that we made our decision to offer Yves the position of interim CEO based on our responsibility to make the best efforts to have a seamless leadership transition, ensure daily operations continued with minimal delay, and also to provide change management specific leadership direction for the duration of the organizational restructuring.
The next two questions come from category A. First one. Over the past few years, Equestrian Canada has experienced a disturbing amount of staff turnover and has enforced significant terms of reference changes to volunteer committees which prohibit long-standing volunteers from continuing to serve on committees. Can the EC board reassure volunteers that they recognize the historical knowledge, experience, stability, and significant cost savings that these volunteers bring? And renew a commitment to allow disciplines to make more decisions at the discipline level where the technical and historical expertise is held.
So to answer that question with respect again to staff turnover, I know I discussed it in the first question, but I will repeat that it is a core priority of the board to ensure that staff turnover in the organization is as low as possible. With respect to volunteer recognition of their contributions and expertise, as we greatly value the commitments and contributions of our team, we equally value and rely upon the support, guidance, and expertise of volunteers. As you know, the board itself is also comprised of volunteers. A few comments on the term of reference comment, the TORs. TORs exist for the categories and all EC committees. The purpose of a TOR is to provide committee members and stakeholders, members of the public, with a common understanding of the committee's scope, objectives, composition, chair, and membership terms, etc. Each committee TOR also provides direction on how committee members are appointed and factors to be considered in that appointment. They're quite specific. All committees, and that is both when you're looking at the governance and operational committees, are equally required to abide by their TORs. And the board of directors is also required to abide by the governance manual and our organizational bylaws. So in 2018-2019, the board of directors tasked the CEO to ensure that all operational committees were following their TORs. At the same time, the board also ensured that all governance committees were following their TORs. So no single committee is individually targeted, and all committees are required to follow their terms as outlined in those TORs. We very much appreciate and recognize the dedication, expertise, and long-standing commitment that committee volunteers make. There is an absolutely important working balance that must exist between volunteers and staff, and collaboration, mutual respect, and working towards the goals of the strat plan are paramount. So these working relationships have been greatly considered in our organizational review.
The second question from category A. There have been multiple references to restricted funds and reserves in recent EC board minutes. Can the EC board assure committees that their restricted funds are being held for the purpose for which they were collected and will not be used for general operating expenses in the future?
Okay, and so as Kirsten and Rob noted earlier in the audited financial statement session, the current statements do show the total balance of the reserve funds. The discipline and operating committee restricted funds are there. Nothing has happened to them. They're presently frozen at the amount that they were in 2018, so you can certainly be assured that those funds are there. As I also mentioned, Yves will be beginning meetings and dialogue in October with every discipline and operating committee, and the purpose of those meetings will also include defining financial policy going forward relating to the reserves and formatting changes in the budget based on the new deferral method of accounting. Again, today, the purpose of our annual general meeting today is to review the financial statements of the year that has just completed, so that's 18-19. So regarding the question, I know we addressed it earlier, the question regarding funds for the future, so that would be 2019-2020 and beyond, that'll be addressed in those staff discussions with operating and discipline committees in October, and all of the information will be clearly presented and all discipline and operating committees will be part of the discussion.
Okay, the next questions come from category B, the first one. We have constituents who are going to need assurance that operations on which they depend will be carried out. What can we tell them, and how do we respond to the concern around the fact that Equestrian Canada's CEO has been replaced several times over the last decade? What do you intend to do differently this time that can make us confident that we won't see a repeat turnover at these high levels?
The board would first like to express that we feel it's important everyone understands that EC engaged in an external third-party review so that we could ensure that our organizational restructuring would address the comments and concerns that we've been hearing over the past years and enable us to move forward on the various initiatives in the strategic initiatives plan. With respect to staff turnover and what we'll do differently, and I mentioned it already twice before, but it is our priority through this process to ensure the longevity and stability of the entire team. It truly is, not only leadership. So what is being done differently is that our organizational review will organize our team roles and departments to achieve the goals we've set for ourselves in the strat plan. We've developed a structure that's aligned with the achievement of the goals we've set. We've developed an aligned 5-year budget. And in addition, our focus is to support a healthy workplace culture in order to minimize future turnover across the organization. This review is not change for change's sake, nor is it undertaken lightly. This sort of planned restructure, based on recommendations of experts in the field, plus feedback collected from our volunteers, community, partners, and team, has been a core driver in our decisions and our completion of the assessment phase of the review. With respect to the other element of the question, needing assurance that, or requesting assurance that regular operations will be carried out, as I did mention earlier, we made our decision to offer the position of interim CEO to Eve based on the board's responsibility to have as smooth as possible of a leadership transition and to ensure daily operations would continue with minimal delay. At the moment, we are achieving this commitment to successfully carry out our daily operations, and we'll continue to work towards that goal.
The second question from category B. We understand that several reports were provided to the board concerning operations, human resources, the organization, and other matters, and that these reports led to the changes made. Can you provide us with a copy of these reports? And if not, what can you tell us about the recommendations contained therein and why you took the action that you did?
Okay, the DSC Communications Restructuring Plan contains 16 operational and strategic recommendations and extensive HR information. The report is currently not publicly available due to the confidential human resources information. But based on this question, I will be asking the new board's HR committee to write an abstract, or what we would call a white paper, about the restructuring plan to share with the community, and they'll start that in October. And this will provide you with the information you're requesting. Now that, with one important point, all details relating to HR matters, organizational charts, staff salaries, employment benefits, employment reviews, that kind of information will not be able to be included because that information is confidential under Canadian law. Members of the HR committee, the board of directors, EC's internal human resources team, and of course the employees themselves are the only individuals that have access to their own confidential employee information, staff conversations, or employment decisions.
Okay, on to category C, 2 questions. First one, category C wishes to know if the board of directors was looking at or reviewing the current organizational governance structure. More specifically, is having 27 voting members working, and are they considering any other options?
So the board's primary focus in the 2018-19 board year was to center the organizational restructure exercise on operational structures and processes and how those align with the strat plan. The reason for this is that after completing the strat plan, which was the where are we going exercise and document, the next step was to turn to assessing our operational structures, which was that are we set up for success to achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves. So to address this specific question, the logical follow-up step to this process would be now to review the organizational governance structure. To date, we have not made plans to begin that more detailed governance assessment. However, we will be meeting with the voting members in person in November at convention. You've all received the notice for that, and we'll discuss it again a little bit when we get to the adjournment of the meeting. There are several items relating to bylaw changes and organizational governance that we would like to discuss with the voting members at that group category meeting, including the format of the AGM, this meeting, and also to assess the feasibility both financially and logistically of having that group CAT meeting annually take place in person versus as a conference call. So I will put this question that Category C has brought forward on the agenda of the first meeting of the new board, which will take place in October. And we'll be able to update and report to the voting members in more detail when we get to that group category meeting in November.
Okay, the second question from Category C, where are the funds for this restructuring coming from, and can we afford to do this, meaning another restructuring?
The answer to this, the board assessed the cost related to the restructuring in depth throughout our deliberation and review process of the organizational review to ensure that we would be able to manage the costs of this process. Where the funds are coming from, they are coming from our annual operating budgets, working capital.
Okay, now that we have addressed 2 questions from each of the categories, we will move on to the remainder of the questions. The next question comes from Category A. With the elimination of John Garner's position, what is the plan for accomplishing the work he was responsible for, including acting as discipline manager for the non-Olympic disciplines, especially with respect to reconciling their budgets, planning and managing major games, and hopefully strategic planning with regards to athlete development?
Okay, so as you pointed out, the position of Director of Sport has actually been removed from the organization, and that position will change in the new org structure, which, as I mentioned earlier, will be rolled out or implemented over the next 3 months. In addition to that, a specific staff resource will be put in place to work specifically with and to develop the non-Olympic disciplines, which is a role that we did not have filled at least in the last year, if not 2. In the immediate future, Olympic discipline committees will continue to work with their discipline managers, and the non-Olympic discipline committees will be working with Anna in the office temporarily. And Anna will be reaching out to you, and as our high performance manager, she will be reaching out to you all in the next few days. To address the work John was doing to support athlete development, high performance, major games management, etc., these areas of focus are well covered in the new org structure. Eve, his first meetings will be to meet with the team, the ECE team, starting in October to commence that new org structure implementation. And following those meetings with the internal team, discipline committees will receive their communications and engage in their dialogue about structural changes to the org chart. And all of the areas you've outlined have been covered and addressed in the new structure. There was just a comment here. Cat A had another question regarding the revolving door of both CEO and CFO positions and then the conflict of interest, but that was one that I answered in the first question, so I won't re-answer that one for you again. And then the next question, actually, I discussed that I'm going to read it because the question has a lot of sub-questions within it. It's regarding coach licensing. There were several questions about that in itself, so what I thought I would do is, instead of Marilyn reading the whole thing and then me answering all of the questions, I'm just going to answer them question by question within the coach licensing question. So this again is the last question from Category A. The first question within this little section is, what is coach licensing? What is the program? So coach licensing, that program is a vehicle through which we at EC can coordinate and manage the credentialing of instructors and coaches within the industry by issuing licenses to those coaches. The process of licensing will allow EC to implement policies and procedures which will allow EC to meet its legislative requirements. Some examples of those types of requirements would be Rowan's Law in Ontario, funding requirements identified by Sport Canada, fulfilling our commitment to the responsible coaching movement, which the board took that pledge in July of 2018. Also, our commitments to PTSOs and implementing mandatory coach certification as outlined in the agreement, the MOA between ECE and the PTSOs that we signed back in April 2018. So the creation of the program also aligns with the obligations that we expect to be introduced with the Universal Code of Conduct that is being in process of being developed for sport in Canada by Sport Canada. So key requirements of obtaining a license, these are listed on the EC website, but I'm just going to list a few of them of what that includes. Number one, ensuring that all coaches and instructors are appropriately screened. Number two, completion of mandatory online training. So that would be harassment and abuse, concussion training. Number four, that the coach has a valid first aid. And number four, confirmation of appropriate coaching experience and or being enrolled in a coach training and certification process. So to just highlight a few benefits of coach licensing and what it brings peace of mind for parents and athletes to know that the minimum safety and ethical standards for coaches are being met. It brings industry-leading insurance coverage. It brings access to third-party complaint management. It brings preferred rates for certified coaches and coaches enrolled in the certification process. And finally, it provides access for coaches to educational materials and coaching resources. So that was that first piece. What is the program? The second question was, is coach licensing different to coach certification? And if it is, please clarify and explain why it's being implemented as well. So the answer to that is that coach licensing is different. It is being introduced to formally separate the process of training and certification from the process of licensing someone to practice as a coach. So this system would be consistent with the practice in many other professions within sport, also in medical and legal professions. Coach licensing is fundamentally different than certification because it focuses on the verification of basic requirements. So what I mentioned before, first aid, background check, etc., to ensure that the successful delivery of a quality program. A license is renewed, our license will be renewed on an annual basis, and it takes a broader approach, which would allow it to be applied to all disciplines. So EC's current National Coach Certification Program, so the NCCP, and other training and certification programs that exist within the sector, each focus on specific skills and competencies that are demonstrated by the coaches in each discipline. So most of the coach certification programs, they're designed to provide coaches with training, and in some cases, like with the NCCP, they would also include a formal assessment. So while the NCCP and some other programs include coaches to participate in continuing education to maintain status, none of those programs are really flexible enough to be able to adjust to requirements over time, and they can be poorly suited to ensuring coaches are signing off on revised policies, codes of conduct, etc. It's also very difficult to take someone's certification away in the event of poor conduct, such as it would be very hard to take someone's university degree away once they've graduated. The next part of this question was, how does coach licensing affect current certified coaches? So the impact on coaches who are currently certified will be minimal. Certified coaches will also receive a reduced rate for their annual coach license. Certified coaches will still need to apply and may need to complete additional screening depending on their province, because as part of the licensing process, it involves the harmonization of screening requirements, so there may be some minor variations across the country. Coaches who have not previously completed the Respect in Sport activity training and making headway concussion models will be required to complete those courses, or EC's new online courses that would address the same topics. Last point, certified coaches may also need to update their first aid if it's about to expire or if it doesn't meet the national minimum requirement of a standard first aid course. 4 more little questions here. The next one, will there now be two fees, certification and licensing, or will it be a combined fee? What will these fees be? So the final pricing for the licensing that will be announced when the program officially launches at convention this November. But yes, there will be a separate fee for licensing and a separate fee for certification. Within licensing, there will also be two levels of a license. There'll be a basic and a professional license, and both will include a list of benefits and provide coaches with discounts on the coach training and certification activities. Next question, when will the licensing be implemented? Coach licensing will be introduced for the 2020 season. So it will be introduced for the 2020 season. Will there be a dedicated qualified in coaching matters staff member for coaching? The answer to that is yes. We actually already have one. We have a dedicated coaching staff person, Helen Richardson, and she's qualified in all matters associated with coaching. And the last question on this topic, will there be an EC committee to oversee coaching certification and licensing programs? If yes, how will the members be selected? The answer to that is yes. Actually, we have those two committees. We have two committees in place already, and they oversee coaching activities. The first one is called the National Coaching Technical Committee, and that is comprised of representatives from each discipline. And the second one is called the National Coaching Operations Committee, and that's comprised of a coaching rep from each PTSO. So as coach licensing is implemented, the mandate of those committees, they're going to be reviewed to align with the needs of the program. So, a long answer, but hopefully that helps provide some clarity on the coach licensing questions.
Okay, the next follow-up question comes from category B. While negotiations and contracts with employees are obviously confidential, we are concerned about the costs associated with terminations. What assurances can you give us that these financial matters are in hand and that they will not affect operations that we depend on or obligations that Equestrian Canada has in moving ahead with current and future plans governed by the Memorandum of Agreement between EC and the PTSOs?
The financial health of the organization is paramount and is fundamental to the achievement of projects such as the projects that we've outlined in the MOA and the Strategic Initiatives Plan. So as I mentioned earlier, EC's developed a 5-year budget that aligns with the organizational structure and also the 2018 to 2022 Strategic Initiatives Plan. And that was done in the core effort to maintain responsible financial oversight over the coming years. Now, the financial commitments to projects that we've made through the MOA between EC and the PTSOs will not be impacted, and our obligations, both financial and resource-based, to our mutual projects will continue as planned.
Okay, and I think this is the last question that we have on the agenda tonight, and again it comes from category B. Looking forward, what can you tell us about any rollout plans and what should we expect to see in the months ahead?
So to answer this question, I decided to give you kind of a perspective of the overall timeline continuum. So relating to how the organizational restructuring project, as it began and as it will head towards its completion. As I mentioned earlier, it dates back to May 2018 when the organizational review began at the board and senior leadership level. By September 2018, the Strategic Initiatives Plan was completed and presented to the voting members at the AGM last year. January 2019, the external third-party organizational review began. March 2019, completion of the strategic plan presentations and discussions with operational committees. I did that along with the CEO. June 2019, public survey on the strategic plan progress was completed and the external third-party organizational review was completed. So that takes us to present, September 2019. Implementation of the new organizational structure has begun. December 2019, the implementation of the new organizational structure be completed. May 2020, recruitment for our new CEO will begin. Of course, July to August 2020, Tokyo Summer Olympics. And then the last date I have here from an organizational review perspective, September/October 2020, permanent CEO in office, organizational review completed. So on a closing note here, as I mentioned earlier, there were additional questions submitted. I will be responding to those and welcome any feedback from the category chairs if they would like to add any questions to that mix. I would like to make one comment because there were a few questions that related to finding information and documentation, and I thought it was really important to mention. There were a few people asked where financial information could be found, and also where the strategic initiatives plan could be found. So if you go to the equestrian.ca website and you go to About, and then you go to Governance, as you scroll down that governance page, you will find everything from our bylaws, our terms of reference, prior year financials, they date back quite a few years, and then of course also the strategic initiatives plan. So I thought that was important to mention for anybody who is on the call or listening, that's where that information can be found. Okay, so we're going to move along. We only have 2 more points that are left in our meeting today. The next section is our new director introductions. Now, before I invite those directors to speak, I would like to ask Wayne Burwash, who is the chair of our nominations committee, if he would share a brief report giving us some insight and updates on the election process and how it went this year.
Okay, thank you, Meg. You can hear me?
Yep, sounds great.
Yeah, okay, and good evening, everybody. Well, I'll be quick here. I think you all pretty well understand the process, but just a brief summary of the nomination election process. This year there were 5 positions available, 4 for the regular 3-year term, and due to the resignation of one director that had 1 year left on the term, 1 position with a 1-year term. By the deadline for applications for the board, we had 9 applications. On the initial review of all the applicants, the nominating committee selected 7 of them to go to the interviewing process. Following the interviewing process, they chose as a final slate of 6 nominees to go on the ballot. So then the voting for the ballot was done this year by a secure online program that worked very, very well, and I thought it was very slick. And also the other additional thing besides doing the tabulation was that it didn't make it necessary for all the scrutineers to fly to Ottawa or something to be together to review the balloting. So anyhow, so I would strongly recommend that we continue using an online software program to do it that's very secure. So anyhow, in the voting, there was 27 members, of course, that voted, and I'm very pleased to say that there was 27 ballots cast, which means that everybody ranked all 6 candidates on their ballot. So this made the tabulation very easy. The scrutineers that reviewed the tabulation was the Chief Executive Officer, Chair of the Nomination Committee, and then our legal counsel, the Equestrian Canada Legal Counsel. So, the rankings from the ballot were converted to a point system, which is on the report. And so as a result of point tabulations, the top 4 candidates, or the 4 candidates getting the highest number of points received a 3-year term. So that's the gist of all the process. And so based on the balloting, I'm sure you're all aware, and the point tabulation, I'd like to welcome the 2 new directors, Beth Underhill and Mark Goldman. That's excellent. And then also welcome the 3 incumbents, which are real plus in the continuity of the organization. And those three were Doug Orr, Carla Robin, and Chris Sorensen. So are there any questions on the election nominating process?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Wayne.
Back to you, Meg.
Great job, yep. So, okay, we're gonna have the opportunity for the incoming and continuing directors to say a brief introduction about themselves. I'll ask them to try to keep it within that minute max, 30 seconds to minute max time frame. So I'm gonna go alphabetically, and we'll lead off with Mark Goldman. Love to meet you.
Hello. I'm Mark Goldman. I live in the Laurentian Mountains, about 160 kilometers north of Montreal. I spent much of my career in broadcasting communication, working mostly for the CBC in Nunavut, Vancouver, Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, the Maritimes. I was involved in current affairs as a producer for many years before moving into culture and variety, and as a director of part of the CBC's marketing arm. I ran my own production company, concentrated on the cultural industry, business, and politics. I did work for the American Paint Horse Association, wrote some magazine pieces for both U.S. and Canadian publications focusing on horses. We have 3 paint horses, and my wife and I continue to ride in Western discipline. And I was involved in cutting, performance, and latterly reining. We also have a granddaughter who competes with her own horse in jumping. I have been a member of other boards, currently sit on a hospital foundation board, and am an elected municipal councillor here in Levier. So I'm very pleased to become part of Equestrian Canada, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mark. Fantastic. So the next would be Doug Orr.
Hi, Meg. Thank you very much. I'll be very brief because I am an incumbent, and I think everybody on the call knows me quite well. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to continue serving on the Board of EC. As Meg's pointed out, it's been a very, very exciting and challenging year, and I'm very excited about the opportunities moving ahead. And some of the opportunities moving ahead, I think we're well positioned to help really meet the needs of our constituents, both on the sports side and on the equine industry side. And I'm looking forward to continuing to serve on this board. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug. And just for everybody, if you can just wait, we're about 5 minutes away, so please do not leave. I have a few things I want to say before we wrap up. Next, Carla Robin.
Thank you, Meg. Over the last few years, I've had the pleasure of working with a really dedicated, problem-solving group of board of directors, and we've all acquired a really broad and detailed knowledge of the issues affecting the organization, the boards, and the industry. And I feel that foundational continuity in the board is important, so I'm very pleased that myself and 2 others were also reelected again for this term. It's important for us moving forward because we really need to implement and affect our program and be transparent and responsible and accountable to the membership with the strategic plan and our growth of EC that's actually going to happen and be realized and not be stalled. And I just want to thank those who elected me for their confidence in myself and the other board members and bringing all of this to reality, because it's really all about the horses and what they do for us. And I will work very diligently to help position us as a world-class organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Chris Sorensen. We lost Chris. Yeah. Beth Underhill.
Thank you, Meg. I've operated Beth Underhill Stables for the past few years. I live in Schomberg, Ontario. I am the rider trainer, coach, and also horse owner at my farm. I'm still an active Grand Prix rider. I've represented Canada, Pan American, Olympic, and World Equestrian Games over my career. I've been a jumping committee member for several years representing the Grand Prix riders. I helped create the Under 25 Youth Program with Equestrian Canada and the Jumping Committee, and was the program manager and chef de keep for the Children's Young Riders
and under 25 athletes up until last year. I am also currently a member of the High Performance Jumping Committee, and I'm a member of the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair Board of Directors. I've been the color commentator for CBC Sports with Scott Russell on many occasions. I do a lot of, teach a lot of clinics across the country.
And join the conference.
Not just the upper levels of the sport, but also at the pony club and riding schools. The pony club is actually where I got my start. And so that gives me a perspective of the sport, not just at the upper level, but at the grassroots level. Thank you very much for welcoming me, and I'm really excited to take part in this on this board.
Thanks, Beth. So thank you to all of the incoming and continuing directors, and we're all looking forward very much to working with you over the next year. So just a few closing points. We're almost at the end today. So thank you again. It's a passionate and dedicated group of individuals who step forward to be part of leading EC forward, and whether it is that you're represented nationally, provincially, by discipline, on committees, etc. So thank you for being leaders and role models for the people and horses you're here to represent. And again, to those of you who are listening on Facebook Live, I again repeat myself, I encourage you to volunteer and put your names forward when committees and associations reach out to you for help. It really takes a village, and we welcome new ideas, enthusiasm, and those who believe that together we can change our industry and sport for the better. And I would like to take one final moment and thank a director who left the organization this year after 6 years on the board. Dominique Chagnon has been active in EC for 16 years, as well as 8 years as VP and then president of Cheval Quebec. Though she's not here today, on behalf of the team and the board, we thank her very much for her dedication to the equestrian industry and sport in Canada for so many years. So we're now into section J, adjournment. Before we wrap that up, I want to remind everybody we have a group category meeting at convention in November 2. Within the next week, Marilyn will be reaching out to all of you with the schedule and to get your travel arrangements made. So thank you again all for your time today and for contributing to